What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, for another episode of UNC Football Show, very own publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ, yet another exciting show ahead, as we've obviously don't know if you guys have heard that are listening. Big game this Friday, day after Thanksgiving, as the Tar Heels host NC State regular season finale in Kenan Stadium. Obviously, Carolina coming off a tough loss to Georgia Tech at home. We'll be looking to bounce back with the big rivalry win over NC State as they prepare for the ACC championship the following weekend on December 3rd. So a lot of fun topics to talk about. We're obviously going to look back a little bit before we dive into the preview a little bit later in the show. So, AJ, I want to, first of all, you were at the press conference today. We're recording this on Monday evening, obviously, game with the holidays and game being on Friday. We usually do these on Wednesday. We're actually recording this one on Monday evening. So AJ's fresh off the press conferences, talked to Mack Brown, Gene Chizik, and Phil Longo. So, AJ, I want to ask you, is I've, listened to the press. I only had a few minutes to listen to the press conference. I haven't been up that long. What was Mack Brown's message to his team this week coming off a really disappointing loss, especially for the fan base against the Yellow Jackets?
Well, it is a different week because it's a shorter week because they play Friday. So they actually didn't practice Sunday. They usually practice day after a game, but they practice today, Monday. So they're full throttle into game week mode. And there were a lot of messages. He's trying to wrap his arms around why they lost and see how he can make it work in a positive way for him moving forward. Mm-hmm. And I think basically, and this is him responding to a question I asked about, it's part of the process. I know people hate that sometimes when we overuse process, but I asked him specifically, how many bricks can you get out of what happened Saturday and apply it toward continuing to build the foundation of this program? And he said a lot. So my take is, okay, they laid an egg. They got up 17-0 and weren't that sharp offensively in going up 17-0. And then they coasted because they thought, well, they don't have any quarterbacks, third stringer, fourth stringer. We're coastal champs. They did not handle the attaboys that well. And then they saw themselves up 17-0 and thought, well, this is easy street. And in basketball, I think you can recover when you go into take the foot off the pedal mode. In football, it's next to impossible to recover when you take the foot off the pedal because of the physicality of the sport, because you have to be at an unbelievably high level of emotion and energy and focus because of the brutality of the sport. And they pulled the foot off and didn't recover it. And they didn't really go into it pressing all the way down. I mean, they were spurting a little bit, but they weren't on a racetrack or anything like that. So they opened the door. They kicked open the door for Georgia Tech, like a bay door at a warehouse.
Yeah, just come on in, yeah.
Racked that thing up and said, come on in, boys.
Yeah.
And Georgia Tech's like, oh, okay, we're going to go on in and we're going to take advantage of this opportunity, which was the end of the half. Carolina screwed up their possession at the end of the half right after Georgia Tech scored. Carolina gets the ball back to start the second half. They didn't get nothing out of it. Georgia Tech gets the ball and scores. And to me, Carolina was playing catch-up all along. Even though they were in the lead, Georgia Tech had taken control of the game, and Carolina did not figure out how to pry that away from them. So the message is they need to be stronger mentally in handling praise. They need to be better at dealing with prosperity. We've talked about it before. We did it in our podcast last week, Jacob, where I went back and said, well, remember Florida State when they were number 5, and remember how they went and had lots of prosperity with the win at Miami, and they thought that's the team they were, and it really wasn't. And I know they played pretty well against Texas A&M, but they were in position to win that game and didn't. Last year, all that prosperity in the offseason, all the high projections for Heisman and top 10, and they let it get to them. So they've got to learn how to handle prosperity. And one of the ways that you do that is to have a lot of prosperity, get to the point where it's all at. Just like anything, you get a new job, it takes you a while to fully immerse yourself in it where everything is normal and regular everyday stuff. I still think this program is in position right now where they're learning how to do that. And they got a giant, ugly lesson Saturday. So that's my takeaway from today. From Mack, there's more stuff from Longo. I thought Longo's was really interesting because there are some issues offensively, and we could get into that stuff today. And a couple of interesting things from Chizik as well.
Definitely. I want to talk about offense real quick. I think you tweeted it out earlier today, but UNC's allowed 26 sacks in the last 6 games. And on the contrary, Carolina's only had 6 sacks in the last 6 games. I thought the Georgia Tech game in particular, I think we talked about it in our 3 things. I tweeted about it a lot. I thought it was a game that was won and lost in the trenches. 6 sacks for Georgia Tech, 0 for North Carolina. There's too much talent on that defensive line to not be able to get to the quarterback. But let's focus on the offense first. Last couple games in particular, some red zone issues as well, where Carolina's really struggled and they've left a lot of points out there. Sometimes you just go look at the Georgia Tech game, opting to go for it on 4th down when, I know people focus on analytics a lot. Maybe you should take the points. I'm not here to talk about that discussion. It's for another day. But the fact of the matter is, I'll let you talk about it. This is a Carolina team that has struggled in the red zone, especially over the last couple games. I think physicality has been an issue and has struggled to protect the quarterback and protect Drake May. And I think we really saw it even more. And we saw some byproducts of that on Saturday because Drake just didn't look comfortable. I think there was more to it than that with why he struggled, but that definitely played a part in it. So AJ, what did Phil Longo have to say about the red zone issues and kind of what do you make of it? Because I think after 2 games and even looking back at the last 6 games protecting Drake May, it's an issue at this point. I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, he said one time Drake didn't trigger the ball where it needed to go. Another time there was a drop that everybody knows about. And another time I believe that there was a sack. A lot of stuff didn't really work. And I think it goes hand in hand with physicality. And I asked him about physicality, especially when he said, look, we got to be super physical this week because NC State's about as physical as it gets in the ACC. And so I asked him about the physicality and its relationship with the red zone. And one of the things he said, and I think a lot of us know this, but it was good to hear him say it, was that, physicality isn't just the offensive line in the run game. There's physicality in pass protection as well. And he isolated, a guy here and a guy there not getting the job done. I think it's been a bigger problem than that. There have been multiple. One of the things that happened the other night was it wasn't like Drake got dragged down by one guy. There were multiple times where Drake's here and he's being suffocated. The walls are closing in on him because multiple guys had the pass rush. So that is an issue. And when you're allowing 6 sacks in a game, and he said one of them was a quarterback draw, one of them was a play that broke down, whatever it is, they were still sacks. And you can't say, well, there was just 6 sacks in this game. That kind of throws the numbers out of whack. It's 26. It was 20 in the previous 5, which is 4 a game. Now it's 26 in the last 6, which is 4.5 a game. And they're up to 32 on the season. So they've got 3 more games left. Now, last year they had 49. But, if they're at 3-3 in the next 2 in a 13-game season like last year, that puts them at 38, close to 40. Mm-hmm. And if everybody can remember 2 years ago, they were in the 34 range, I think is what it was. And the kids coming back last year said, our goal is to keep it under 20. Well, here they are now at 32, and they only have 15 sacks. So turnover margin is something a lot of people talk about, but I think sack margin is a stat we need to track with this program because it's an area that has been a point of emphasis on both sides of the ball since Mack got here, and it still is. And they haven't really made any progress on closing the gap in those numbers. And I think that that's something that will be addressed in the offseason, has to be addressed, but they got to figure out a way to limit the pressures on Drake right now, because I thought that was a part of him having a rough night the other night, was he expected dudes to be in his face a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And he didn't. He post great numbers. His NFL rating was not very good under pressure. It's usually really good. So the red zone issue, I think, is in part up front. I think part of it is that they've had a lot of different guys at running back, and you want to run the ball well in the red zone, and everything is quicker hitting there. So you have to have great chemistry with the quarterback and the running back there. But it is a problem. The last couple of weeks, they were in the red zone 5 times Saturday, and they only scored 1 touchdown. Mm-hmm. They got to be better than that. And they've been sensational up until the last couple of weeks. And Jacob, since you brought it up, as far as the field goals situation, going for it on fourth down, not kicking the field goals. Mack's a Hall of Famer. I yield to him with everything. And had they worked, he'd say, hey, everyone would say that's a great decision. But I'm a big believer that you take points, especially earlier in the game, because so often we see coaches who opt to go for it and they end up getting nothing. They're chasing those points the rest of the game because they thought they should have had them. They're chasing those points and they earn the points. I think when you go down the field and you're in position to score some points, you just go ahead and take it. On the road against Wake, I would take the points against a good team. I know, Wake field goals aren't going to be Wake Forest, but you know what? They would have. Because if they get a couple field goals there at the time that they had opportunities to take them, maybe they take total control of that game and it never becomes a 2-point game where they need to kick a field goal in the last minute to win. So speed up to Georgia Tech, 17-0. I even had a writer who covers Georgia Tech say to me at halftime, boy, Mack got a little greedy there. That's what he said. And I said, well, he goes for it on fourth down. He wants to be aggressive. He believes touchdowns win games. But given the struggles that Georgia Tech has had offensively and that they're playing a third and fourth string quarterback, I would have kicked, go up 20-0, tack on another field goal in the second half. And you're not in position to have to worry about if Josh is going to catch that ball. You're not in position where maybe a blown call on a holding penalty could cost you the game, so to speak. I don't believe that those calls do cost a team a game because they put themselves in that situation because they didn't execute in the red zone and they missed opportunities to get points when they could have taken points. I'm a believer in kicking. You chase the points in the fourth quarter. Maybe you go for it in the fourth quarter. I don't like when coaches go for 2-point conversions too early because if they don't get it, they got to chase those points too. A little bit conservative, a little bit maybe old school, but that's kind of how I prefer it. And I think in the last 2 weeks, those games may have played out a little bit differently had they gone ahead and taken the points.
No, I agree. Carolina's been a lot of tight games this year too. I think when we look back at that, I get analytics. I understand it's a big part of football now, but I also think at times just take the points early in the game. And like you said, it might come down to it in the fourth quarter where then you can chase some points, go for it a little bit more. But I kind of agree with you on that. And I do see the other side of it in some ways. And when it works, it works. And when it doesn't, you're an idiot. So, I mean,
let me add this. And Josh wasn't getting open the other night.
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't getting open. So they weren't going to score a lot of touchdowns. It just didn't have that feel. So and Drake was not sharp from the outset other than his first throw. He wasn't super sharp. So I think sometimes, you know what? Let's just take these points.
Yeah.
Because Georgia Tech's not going to score 30 against this defense. If they do, then shame on Carolina.
Yeah.
Shame on Carolina, right? They scored 3 touchdowns in 4 possessions with a third and fourth string quarterback. The fourth string guy hadn't taken a snap all year. But I think you take those points, you get something out of it. Sometimes it takes a while. You get some field goals to generate some mojo. We saw Ohio State playing a game earlier this year where they kicked a bunch of field goals in the first half, and then they kind of flipped the switch a little bit in the second half, got some touchdowns, and they won the blowout. Take the points. I'm just a big fan of taking the points. I'm not saying that it's wrong not to. I'm just telling you what my preference is personally.
No, I agree.
But I've never been a football coach, and I'm not in the Hall. I'm not in anybody's Hall of Fame for anything, and never will be. So there's that.
Yeah. Mack's the Hall of Famer for a reason, but I do agree with you. I think early in the game too, especially when the offense is struggling like Carolina's was. I know they weren't struggling early necessarily, but I think when they're struggling, like they ended up struggling, it would have been smarter to take the points.
They weren't smooth.
For sure.
They weren't smooth. Yeah, it was pretty obvious they were. Outside of the first, they had 113 yards in their first 2 plays. They had 252 on their last 61. They weren't smooth. Take the points.
Yeah, take the points and keep it moving. Real quickly, I want to talk about some of the reaction to the loss on Saturday. I was in the stands for that one. I got a lot of people who sit around where my dad's ticket is that have been going to Carolina games for a long time. And I was able to kind of talk with some of them during and after the game. And, I've been going to Carolina games for a long time as well. And obviously been covering the media for about 4 years now. And, I think the biggest thing I think I took away from talking to fans on Saturday was this is Carolina football. If you've been following it let me explain. I don't mean disrespect by that. This is from Carolina fans' mouths, not mine. That guys have been going to football games for 50 years say, as soon as you think they're there and you think they've finally figured it out, they let you down with something like this. And like I said, I've been going to Carolina games for a long time, and I have witnessed a lot of that happening as well. It's just a program that, even going back to Mack's first tenure, was just never quite able to get over that hump. Now, I'm not saying this is year 4 Mack Brown part 2. I think, like we've talked about, this program is on schedule again after a really dismal season last year. And I think that is still in some ways left a bad taste in Carolina fans' mouth because of what happened last season, maybe leaving them a little bit more impatient. But Carolina fans very, very frustrated after the loss. And I completely understand it when you consider coming off a big win at Wake. ACC Coastal Division champs, you get up 17-0, come out the gates looking really, really good. And then you let Georgia Tech score 21 unanswered. On top of that, you don't score a single point in the second half. So I definitely understand where the frustrations are. I think some fans that we've seen on Twitter, and again, Twitter's not a great judge of things when you go look in terms of sports and overreactions and things like that, but a lot of overreaction on there. Yeah, and that as well. Don't get me started on that. A lot of overreaction in terms of that from certain people online as well, which you expect as well when you lose a game like that. So what are your thoughts on just kind of what you've seen and, maybe some things you've heard from Carolina fans? Because, it's a pretty disappointed fan base of what happened on Saturday night. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Well, of course they're disappointed because they lost a game they shouldn't have lost.
Yeah,
and
that's what it is.
And maybe a lot of these fans thought that this team was maybe a little bit better than it is. I think it's a good team. I don't think it's a real good team. I think it's a good team. They have a couple of real good players. They have a couple of real good players, and they were winning games. And what's interesting is that a lot of the people thought, there's an outside shot for the CFP. I've never looked at this team and thought, that's a CFP team. Yeah, did they have an outside shot? So much craziness would have had to happen. And I don't even think, and I don't think it'd be even fun as a fan to try to root in the sense that you're thinking CFP for this group, because that's not what they are. So a couple things to address by what you said. Yeah, they had their what the hell game. They have one every year. And you go back in time. They've had some really good teams in the past, and all of a sudden there's that what the hell. Mm-hmm. And in 81 was the loss, I think, at home to South Carolina. They had that loss to Maryland, the controversial onside kick in the 80s. They've had a lot of games where stuff like this happens. And it's also teams that weren't as heralded or had the gaudy record like this team had going into the game. They just have it. The program has to get over that hump at some point. It can. I don't know if it will, but it has to get over that. So I think it's a fan base gets angry because it's a repeat of, here we go again. This is Carolina. As soon as we think things are changing, there's a game that reminds us that it's just Carolina. That's my take from a lot of people. I think the articulation of that was in a little bit more interesting way than what I just said, especially the inebriated ones on Twitter Saturday night. Mack getting fired. Longo got fired 30, 40 times on our Twitter feed.
Yeah, Chiswick gets fired like once a game, yeah.
Yeah, there are guys that go to church and pray for Chiswick to get fired. So
it's true, man. It's true.
It's what fans do, and I get it, and the staff gets it, and I think it makes it fun sometimes when they're like that, and I like the care factor. I think the care factor is actually a good sign for the program, because when you're that disappointed over a loss, it means that the loss hurt. Mm-hmm. And I've said all along, in order for North Carolina football to approach in any way the importance and passion of North Carolina basketball, the football team has to have some games where when they lose, it hurts the fan base. Yeah. It becomes personal. And I think that this was that. I didn't think it was a good crowd Saturday. Mack lauded the crowd at his presser today. I thought it was a poor showing. It was a sellout, and there were scattered empties everywhere. The student section was not full. The people left because it was cold. I think there were a lot of things wrong with Carolina football on Saturday where the right mojo wasn't there. And it wasn't just on the field. It was in the stands too. I didn't think the crowd made a ton of noise. I thought they were a little bit dead. So Carolina football has a lot of room to grow. I think the potential is there that Carolina football can grow in that way. But, when you have a big game and you have a Heisman Trophy guy and you're 9-1, that place should have been packed 5:30. It's the perfect time. There's no excuses for people to be late. And there were a lot of people that were late. So I know some folks aren't going to like that I'm being a little bit critical of the fans, but I think it's justified. So a couple of the other things that you said that people were critical of, well, Mack's really not doing a good job because they're barely winning games. And my response is Dean Smith became legendary in part because they would pull games out of their you-know-what at the end.
Doesn't matter how you win it.
Woody Durham became legendary when he would tell people, go where you go and do what you do. Well, what did that mean? They were in a nail biter. That meant that they were in a nail biter. And you got to go to your, whatever it is that you do, superstition, whatever it is, to help pull the Tar Heels over the top and get them a win. So you can do that in football too. And really good coaches win the majority of their close games. So that's, to me, a positive for Mack. The other thing is, and I saw this a lot, I've gotten this a lot through Facebook, through DM, through emails. I don't know how people get my email address, text messages. Some people have my phone number, and people I've actually seen. They said, well, you know, if it wasn't for Drake May, they'd be a 500 team. So year 4, Mack's not really doing a good job. Well, doesn't he get credit for having Drake May? Mack's not giving his national championship ring back because he had Vince Young. It's the coach's job. Does Dean give it away in 82 because he had Michael and he had Worthy and Perkins? No.
Yeah,
he gets credit for having Drake May. He flipped him from Nick Saban. Give him some credit. So I get it. I'm cool with that. I'm glad that it matters. I actually think it's a great sign for the program when people are furious and bitching and moaning on Twitter when they're not playing well. I think that's a good sign. And it's a good sign, and it's happening because they have done a lot of positive things and because this thing's going in the right direction. It didn't look like it's Saturday. It didn't at all look like it's Saturday, but it is going in the right direction.
Yeah, no doubt about it. 9-2, especially when you look at what happened last year. You look at some of the talent on this roster, and we talked about it preseason, AJ. We talked about it during the season. This year really wasn't supposed to be the year, on paper at least. Next year really is the year where you think Carolina can really do some really good things. But again, 9-2, and the fact that fans are hurting as much as they are after a loss, because I've been to many games during many seasons where bring on basketball season tweets start coming out after 6 games. It's not really been the case this year. It's a different belief and a little bit of a different optimism in the program, and hence why it hurts so much on Saturday for a lot of Carolina fans. Like you said, that is a positive sign of where this program's going, but it's going to take time to not throw the process word in there one more time.
In fairness to the fans, that there are some straight football things to be concerned about. The defense hasn't been as good as everybody thought it would be. And the simplification and all that kind of stuff, I've seen some progress in some areas. I don't think the stats from Saturday are anything to celebrate that much because Georgia Tech's offense is pretty bad, especially with the 3rd and 4th string quarterback. I think it was an okay performance, but the defense needed to be a little bit better in order to win the game. That's the way it turned out. So the defense has been has been a big concern in some areas. I don't think it's as bad as what the national perception is, but I don't think the offense is as good as the national perception either. They've scored 40 points twice since the App State game. They have 27 points in a win at Miami. They have 31 points in a win at Virginia. They have 38 points in a win over Duke. So they had 17 the other night. They had 36 in a win at Wake Forest. Yeah, those are 38 and 36, a good number of points, but there's some offenses that this school's had in just in the last 7 years that were rocketing into the 40s and 50s a lot once they got into conference play. So this team's got into 40s twice in conference play. It's a good offense, and with a great quarterback and a great wide receiver and really good tight ends, but it's it's an average offensive line maybe. And there's some other areas that don't appear to be real smooth right now. Yeah. So the fans have a lot of things to pick at, but the sum of the thing's headed in the right direction.
Agreed. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I do think things are definitely headed in the right direction, and we'll see what happens over these next few games. Because, like you said, Carolina wins the ACC championship in a couple games. We'll be having a whole other conversation in a few weeks. So we'll see what happens, and it'll start this Thursday against the Wolfpack. AJ, real quickly before we move on to the Wolfpack in the preview, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, MyPerfectFranchise.net. You guys know we love them. Really excited to continue partnering with them. So, guys, if you're looking to diversify, looking to lead the corporate rat race, gain control of your own income and wealth? What about, being able to create your own schedule, have an unlimited PTO, all that kind of stuff? You can do that with myperfectfranchise.net. Andy Ludicky is the founder and owner of myperfectfranchise.net, and he's a longtime Rivals member, diehard college football fan, massive Mack Brown fan as well, and a franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses throughout his career. So what he does, using his expertise, he helps others find their American dream through a free and very thorough consultation process. So guys, have you ever thought about starting a franchise? And again, there's so many different types of franchises. A lot of times we hear franchise, you think like restaurant, like a McDonald's or, Burger King, something like that. That's kind of what pops your head. But there's so many different franchises and so many different industries that you can go in. I mean, just drive down the street in a busy area and you'll see franchises just popping up everywhere. So if you ever thought about wanting to do that, you ever thought about that be something you'd want to look more into or possibly do on your own, you can do that with Andy Ludicky, and he'll walk you through 100% free consultation process to see if what he's offering and what you're thinking about doing in terms of starting a franchise is right for you. So guys, 100% free. What do you really have to lose? Make sure you check him out. Find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. And if you do end up talking to Andy, make sure you talk a little Mack Brown with him. He's a big Texas fan as well, but has a lot of love for UNC because Mack Brown is obviously here right now doing his thing. So, and make sure if you do talk to him, you let him know, that Tar Heel Illustrated sent you. Again, guys, myperfectfranchise.net. Link is in the description below. We did put a couple podcasts out that AJ hosted with Andy last week. So if you want to see those, go watch those on our YouTube channel as well. I'll try to link those below as well. You can learn a little bit more about what he does, his business, and how he can help you. Again, guys, myperfectfranchise.net. Link is in the description below. All right, AJ, let's dive into this preview. Obviously, North Carolina, number 18, sitting at 9-2, 6-1 in ACC play. NC State, 7-4, 3-4 in conference play. Lost 2 straight to Boston College and at Louisville last weekend. So focusing on the offense, I think this is where a lot of the struggles have come with NC State. Obviously, Devin Leary getting hurt a few weeks ago and has missed quite a few games since, been out for the year. So ranked 9th in total offense in the ACC, 344.7 yards per game. Another interesting stat, kind of diving into it, haven't thrown for over 300 yards since September 24th win over UConn, who I know many people, UConn program that has struggled mightily, been one of the worst programs in college football over the years.
They are bowl eligible
about to say,
this year.
Been doing a little bit better this year, which is surprising in a lot of ways.
Jim Moore Jr., and they got 6 wins.
Yeah, have managed to turn it around, which is good to see because historically it's just been a program that just gets trounced every single game. But AJ, focusing on that quarterback position, I think this is the most interesting one to watch. And let me throw this in here. We're recording this on Monday evening. Ben Finley, brother of Ryan Finley, who I'm sure a lot of NC State fans, UNC fans remember, NC State fans, of course, remember as well, did start against Louisville. MJ Morris, who's kind of been the guy that's filled in for Devin Leary and done some really nice things in some of the games he's been healthy in, did miss the Louisville game. As of right now, in terms of his status, I believe it's still up in the air. Something could have been announced in terms of him playing this week, but as of right now and as of what we've heard, his status is still questionable going into Saturday. So it'll be kind of interesting to see who does take a majority of those snaps against the Tar Heels, but very similar situation to what we saw against Georgia Tech. You're essentially relying on your second, third, and fourth string quarterbacks here potentially to start against North Carolina. So, and something Carolina will be looking to exploit again, but something that can also be a little bit of a challenge to prepare for, as we've seen with this program, especially over the past couple of years, preparing for quarterbacks they're not necessarily a lot of tape on, for lack of a better word. At the running back position, Jordan Houston, 500 yards on 119 carries. I'm gonna butcher this name so bad, so I apologize. Demi Sumo Karangbe missed last game as well. He was the guy who was taking a majority of the snaps as well, but is out hurt. I think his status is still unknown as of right now, at least going into Saturday. So some injuries on that side of the ball for NC State. And then at wide receiver, Thayer Thomas been kind of their go-to guy in a team that, again, has struggled over recent weeks on offense. 586 yards and 4 touchdowns for him at that wide receiver position. AJ, defensively, though, it's a different story. This is a really good NC State defense. I think every Carolina fan who even loosely follows NC State a little bit knows how good their defense has been this year. 4th best defense in the ACC, allowing just 323 yards per game. Diving into it a little bit more specifically, second best scoring defense in the ACC, allowing just 18.7 points per game, and second best defense at stopping the run in the league as well, allowing just over 100 yards rushing per game. So this is a physical defense, an experienced defense, and a really talented defense that Carolina is going to have to be on their A game to put up some points and yardage on Saturday. Drake Thomas leads the team in tackles, that linebacker position, and sacks, 80 tackles and 5.5 sacks on the year, one of the best players in the league. I believe Dave Doran said today that Scott Satterfield said that after the game on Saturday that Drake Thomas is the best player in the league in his opinion. And you look at his stats and you can't really argue that, especially defensively. Then linebacker Isaiah Moore, second on the team in tackles and third in sacks as well. So really strong linebacking core, but just an experienced defense that's really, really talented and really, really tough to score on. So AJ, when you look at this NC State team, I know offensively it's a group that struggled and is a group that has quite a few question marks at the quarterback position in particular. But again, I think it's a really interesting matchup on Saturday for a whole lot of different reasons. But there's one thing I think that's for sure is if Carolina plays like they did, especially offensively against Georgia Tech, it's going to be a really, really long afternoon on Friday, because this is again a really, really talented NC State defense.
And I apologize for looking down a couple of times because my phone is blowing up like crazy. So had to
make sure no breaking news is breaking off, right?
Yeah, exactly. Jack Chambers was the second team quarterback. He's a transfer from Charleston Southern, and then they just kind of had some issues. I mean, it's unfortunate that Leary's not healthy and isn't able to play. Carolina's preparing for Chambers and Finley. My understanding is that the freshman's not going to be able to go, so they're going to
Morris,
prepare.
Yeah, preparing. That's kind of what I've heard too. Yeah,
they're preparing for Chambers and Finley. There are some differences. They did see Finley 2 years ago.
Yeah,
in 2020, the game he played the most in that year was the Carolina game. He had a little bit of success. So they have seen him, but they're primarily watching tape from Louisville because it's the most recent thing. They've got different guys around them than they had then. So that's kind of what they're focusing on. They can't let State have a big offensive game. State hasn't had a big offensive game for a while against a reputable team. So Carolina's defense can't allow someone else to play out of character, and they kind of regularly do that. I think where this game is going to be won or not won for Carolina from the Tar Heels perspective is how the offense does against that defense. Because I don't think if State's going to score, if Carolina scores 30 points, I have a hard time seeing NC State scoring more than 30 points without special teams and defensive touchdowns being a factor. Of course, this is Carolina's defense, and we've seen what they've done before against some, Virginia scored 28 points. And that was way above their numbers, your previous highs against Power 5 teams. But I think how Carolina handles the physicality of State's defense, I think how they handle those linebackers. Mack today called them the best linebacker group in the country.
I can't really disagree.
Yeah, and I know Mack kind of, overstates it about opponents sometimes. I get it. It's football talk, but they are really good. And by the way, I got to give some props to Drake Thomas, because when I saw him in high school, I wasn't sure he was quick enough to play linebacker in the ACC. I really wasn't. And there were some other people I talked to that weren't either. But in speaking with the guys that cover NC State, they say this dude is such a hard worker. He's so committed to being as good as he possibly can. He gets everything out of his talent, and he very well could be an NFL player. So kudos to him and that family, which is an NC State football family. So I'm looking forward to seeing their linebackers in person as a football guy, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Carolina handles the challenge of playing against that defense. They got some dudes in the back of that defense. They got some dudes up front. They're very physical. When Dave Doran's teams are not soft. Dave Doran's teams aren't reliant on just finesse stuff. They're going to come in here and try to rough up Carolina. Yeah, they're going to try to pop Carolina. Georgia Tech was very physical, and Carolina didn't handle it that great. Carolina did handle Pitt's physicality, but I think this NC State team is more physical than Pitt. I think they're more reliant on being physical than Pitt, especially because of the quarterback situation. They're going to run. They're going to try to pound it, and they're going to try to pop Drake and get him out of there. And that's football. No, nothing wrong with that. That's football. That's if they get him out, then they got a great chance of winning the game. So I think how Carolina handles that, how Drake deals with some of the early pressures that they're going to put on him, and they're going to send those linebackers. They blitz a lot, and Drake Thomas going to come right at the gut. Whoever's the running back better pick him up, or he's going to pop Drake. So I think how Carolina handles that's going to decide the game. If they don't handle it very well, State comes into Chapel Hill and wins. If they do handle it well enough and they hit on some big plays, Carolina will win the game. Yeah. It's as simple as that to me. It's as simple as that. Now, if Carolina's defense just pulls a clunker and they show that maybe they haven't made that much progress, and I think they have made some progress, then maybe it's a different story. But it clearly is going to be determined when Drake Thomas is on the field and when Drake May is on the field. That's where the game's going to be won or lost for the Tar Heels.
Agreed. I think it comes down, like kind of hitting on what you said, my key to victory is you got to win the trenches if you're North Carolina. They've struggled to do it over the last 6 games. We talked about it earlier, allowed 26 sacks and registered just 6 in their last 6 games. Carolina's got to be better than they were, especially on Saturday in the trenches. Or again, I don't think they win this football game because of how physical, not only physical NC State is on defense especially, but how talented they are defensively as well. And you can sit here and say, well, they don't have a quarterback and their offense has been anemic. It doesn't matter. If you've watched this Carolina defense this season, they can give up points to just about anybody. So for me, it comes down to the trenches. I think Carolina needs not only protect Drake and give him time on Saturday, but on the flip side, they need to get some pressure on whoever's going to be playing at that quarterback position because it's not their number one guy, and they're pretty far down the depth chart right now as well. So if you can make their quarterback uncomfortable, make him have to make throws that he's not used to making and hasn't made this year, then I think Carolina's defense can be really successful. But they've got to be physical. They got to be ready to play, and they've got to win the trenches for me.
And stop the run. Don't let Jordan Houston's a really talented guy. Don't let him scoot through the holes and get into the second level, because then that could be a problem. So if they force whoever's at quarterback, be it Finley or Chambers, if they force them to try to beat Carolina with their arm, then Carolina has a decided advantage on defense. Should anyway. I mean, their coverage has been so-so. But Storm Duck, by the way, Mack said that Storm played his best game as a Tar Heel Saturday night.
I could agree. I thought he was really good. Well.
Yeah. I asked Gene today about that, and he said, he's tackling well, he's covering well. He's gotten 2 picks in the last 3 games. Mm-hmm. He's tackling better. The run support at corner, wherever he's lined up, is a little bit better. He does want Tony Grimes to improve in that area. But the Tar Heels are covering a little bit better. They're doing some stuff a little bit better. But you cannot let NC State's quarterbacks play way out of character in a positive for them. That would offset whatever advantages Carolina can muster offensively. And I don't know if they're going to have any. That's going to be a treat. As a football junkie, I can't wait to see how Carolina handles that NC State defense. That's the game to me. I know I said it already.
Agreed. Yeah, you're right.
I'll say it again. That's the game. They've given up 26 sacks in the last 6 games. State blitzes like crazy. And they got NFL dudes that are blitzing. So how do the Heels handle that? That's it right there. I cannot wait to see how that plays out on Friday.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating. I think it's going to be a really good game too, AJ. I'm excited for it. Last thing, prediction time, as we always do to wrap these one up. Against the last regular season prediction of the year. We'll have 2 more of these, obviously, with the ACC championship game as well as the bowl game, wherever Carolina ends up. But I'm saying 31-24, North Carolina. Not super confident in that pick. I think what makes me a little bit more confident, let's put it this way. If Devin Leary was still healthy and playing, especially with how Carolina's defense has been this year at times, especially if they were coming off the same performance they put out against Georgia Tech, I'll be a little bit more concerned about it. But I'm going to say 31-24 Carolina. I think Carolina does just enough, and I think we have some kind of late game craziness as this rivalry game just always seems to have for whatever reason. So I'm going to go 31-24 North Carolina. I think Carolina will bounce back and play better than they did against Georgia Tech. I think that could be a positive for them, a little bit more of a point to prove, get that bad taste out of your mouth and get some confidence going into Charlotte, because you do not want to be coming off 2 losses and kind of limping into that ACC championship game. So 31-24, what are you thinking, AJ?
Late game craziness at NC State, Carolina.
I know, right? That's never happened
Or
before.
How about the T.A. McClendon fumble, courtesy of Khalif Mitchell, and it was a fumble? Or the Russell Wilson 1-yard Hail Mary? I mean, or Gio Bernard's punt return?
Yeah, there's never any late game craziness.
I hope it's like that. I love the hatred. The late, great Eddie Landreth, God rest his soul, said the best thing I've ever heard someone in the media say right before a game. Tucker McLaughlin said one. I'll tell you that in a second. But Eddie Landris sitting next to him, courtside for an NC State Carolina basketball game, probably about 2003, 2004. It's in what is now PNC Arena. And the place is just on fire. It's such a great buzz. And he turned to me and he said, I love this. It's just a good old-fashioned blinking hate fest.
Yeah.
And the way he said it, the moment he said it, just sunk in. And I always think about that whenever these teams meet and I'm covering them in basketball or football. The other thing Tucker McLaughlin said, anybody that knows Tucker can laugh over this one. It was right before the Carolina-Villanova Final Four game in 2009, I think it was. He was sitting next to me on press row in Detroit, and he said, "Dog, this is why we grind the way we do, big dog." I said, "You're right, Turkey," and I gave him a fist bump. So he's big Turkey.
That's a fact, man. Shout out Tucker.
So my prediction, I kind of like what you're saying. I think that Drake May is not going to be pedestrian for 2 straight games.
I don't think so.
And Josh Downs was only targeted 5 times every day, not because of Drake so much. There was one time he missed him, but he had a tough time getting open, which is rare. State will present some similar type challenges, but I actually think that those two will hook up. Antoine Green's back. That'll change the way State defends. Georgia Tech didn't have to worry about him. So I think, and John Copenhaver will be back. So Carolina will have their full complement of tight ends. I think the Tar Heels are a little bit too much. Drake hits on some big plays and lots of chunk plays, and the Tar Heels do enough to get the job done and pick up their 10th win for only the 2nd time in a season since Mack left in 1997.
Yeah, I think Carolina fans would quickly forget about that Georgia Tech loss if they can get a win on Saturday against NC State, because, God, after what happened in Raleigh last year, I know Carolina fans are just begging for that. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be an exciting game, though. It's always a fun rivalry to cover. And like you said, it's going to be a good old-fashioned hate fest in Chapel Hill. And to be honest, that's exactly what you want to see. So that's going to do it for us. Another episode of the UNC Football Show. We appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Make sure you check out myperfectfranchise.net. Give Andy a shout out if you do end up talking to him. We'll put the link in the description below so you can head on over there and see if what Andy's offering is what you want to do. But again, I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well so you know every time we upload it. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.